So back in the late 90s, when Brent and I were starting lastminute.com, unintended consequences of technology were never more vexing than this. Justin, our head of customer services, came up to stand by my desk one day. So you can imagine my desk. You can imagine a huge mahogany desk, masses of flowers all over it. Not really. It was a small plastic desk which hardly even stood up. Stand there and he'd say, "I cannot deal with this customer. I have literally no idea how to calm them down. You deal with it. You think you're so good at customer service." And I remember taking the phone and being, whoa, this man screaming every single swear word you could possibly imagine down the phone at me. We'll just say that bitch was at the polite end of what he was screaming. And it took me an incredibly long time to work out why he had lost his temper so badly with us at lastminute.com. Then I worked out it was because of our one-click fast buy function. Brent, if anyone knows him here, and I'm sure many of you do, is brilliant at spotting what the next technology innovation is going to be. And he'd spend a lot of time late at night on Amazon in the US, then sending incredibly complicated emails to all of us saying we must put all these features live on our website. Amazon, with its team of 10,000 software engineers, lastminute.com with its team of 10 software engineers. Anyway, the one-click buy function was something that he wanted to put live as quickly as we could, and we worked on it for ages. We were so pleased with it. We thought, this is going to be brilliant. You know, you populate the details of what you bought last time you went on a holiday. It's kind of annoying filling in all those forms. You don't have to do the whole endless thing with your credit card. Da, da, da. Who's not going to love it? Well, it turns out this man didn't love it, because the first time that he'd used lastminute.com, he had been going on holiday with his wife and family. Let's just say this time he'd booked a mini break with someone that was not his wife and was definitely nothing to do with his family. And we had sent the tickets to his home address. Pretty bad. I really didn't know what to do, so I sent his wife a bunch of flowers with an apology. And you know, it's a somewhat light-hearted story, although Justin and I did feel quite shell-shocked after it had happened. But it was really probably the worst thing in terms of unintended results of our technology that we faced back in those heady early days of the late 90s e-commerce revolution. And now, 2019, it all feels quite different, doesn't it? Undermining democracy, hacking of our public spaces and our private spaces, massive gender inequality in our sector, hugely complicated biases that we're only beginning to unpick. Just today, I'm sure many of you saw the Home Office being caught yet again for a bad use of an algorithm based on biased data that is preventing people from getting visas or passports that should be able to have received them. And as someone that still fervently believes in the promise of this technology, of this incredible power of both digitization and connectivity, it's quite hard not to feel, at the age of 46, don't repeat that both me and the internet are going through somewhat of a midlife crisis. So I reflect a lot on how can we make sure that the next decade doesn't replicate the mistakes of the last decade. How can we make sure that the future we're building using these amazing tools, the tools that we're talking about here at CogX, and the tools that we haven't even thought of yet, are really going to give us the best shot at survival? And I think it comes down a lot to responsibility, which I'll come back to in a minute. I started a small think tank called Doteveryone. Some of them here. Give us a cheer, Doteveryone, in the front row. And we've done some research recently, which I think you might find interesting. Last year, we surveyed the general population about their feelings about technology. 50% of people feel as though technology has helped them every day. Who wouldn't agree? At an individual level, I love the fact that I can just, boom, order something to eat, quickly connect with someone, quickly find out the quickest way home, see what's happening with the trains, the weather, whatever it might be. But only 12% of people think that technology has helped society. 12%. That's quite alarming for a sector that is literally eating us up every single day. And this year, we just released some data to understand what people working in our sector, in the technology sector, feel about their jobs and the stuff they're doing. And, generally, it's pretty good. People feel as though it's a career full of opportunities, that obviously there's massive growth around us. But 25% of people that we surveyed felt uneasy about the choices they were being asked to make about the products they were building. 25%, quite high. A quarter of the people working in the sector felt uneasy about those products they're building. And 18% of those people said they would left the company because of something that they didn't want to do, or a choice that they were being asked to make that didn't feel right, that didn't feel moral, didn't feel ethical. That's a big amount of people, especially in a sector that desperately needs talent and resource. And I mention that research because I think it's important when we are here in our excited bubble about the possibilities of the world, about all of the things that we are celebrating this week in London, quite rightly. When we were starting lastminute.com, we'd go to a meetup and it would be me meeting Brent because there was practically no one else in the sector. Now, as you guys know, this is a vibrant digital economy and it's an exciting place to be. A new startup every hour, I think I read. That's quite phenomenal. But if that is disconnected from the big challenges of the world around us, and if the people in the sector don't feel entirely comfortable, then I think we have some problems, and we need to think carefully about what role the UK, what role London can play over the next decade. And I think that the word responsibility is one that we at Doteveryone come back to a lot, and I come back to as well. Now, I look at this from 3 or 4 different axes. The first is about how to make sure that we are all at a higher level of understanding when we're making complex technology choices, complex policy choices, complex decisions about how our society is going to be. You know, I sit in the House of Lords, and the 2 questions that I'm asked most in the House of Lords are, why isn't the Wi-Fi working? Which is obviously something that I would be very, very, very badly equipped to deal with. And then secondly, when can we turn off all social media? That's sort of the perspective that I often get from people who are, you know, interested but not educated about technology. And I believe very strongly that one of the first and most important things that we do as a country is help educate the people who are in our public sector, leading our public organizations, to be able to make better decisions for our future with an understanding of technology. Of course, we all need to have some kind of basic level of understanding. We need to be inclusive and we need to make sure people have basic digital skills. But I would actually argue there is a more pressing need to help people in public roles understand the potential of the tools around them. There is such a gap. I read recently, I think that it was the writer Yuval Harari saying that we are still basically Neanderthal people living in a Star Trek generation, not quite his words, but I think it was that, with medieval institutions. And that is the sort of 3-part problem, that we are still basically feral. We are working in a world that is speeding up so fast, but we are with institutions that often were invented, if not 100 years ago, 500, 600, 700 years ago. And that is a gap that needs to be closed very urgently. We at Doteveryone are doing some work to help regulators and people in public life be more able to cope with the modern world and to understand a few of the choices and options available to them. If you're working in the health sector, what kind of policies should be recommended in a world where data has a different currency, where the tools available are a different set of tools to the ones 50 years ago? But I would argue that unless we put this at the heart of what we demand of all of our elected officials and people who are in public sector roles, we in the UK are going to continue to struggle to really take the benefit of these amazing technologies. There is such a job to be done to put digitization in its most positive form at the heart of how we think about our society. You know, if you look at local government, there are some amazing examples of things happening across the country, some specific cases at a local level of brilliant councillors or brilliant local government chief executives who've understood about the power of what they can do using technology, but it is not widespread enough. I was speaking last week in the Lords in a debate about people with learning difficulties who are in care. And when you start to drill down about the quality of data in that sector alone, and the profound impact it has on people's lives who are at the most vulnerable end of our society, it's really pretty depressing. The people that are focusing on it with imagination and understanding, who have also the capacity to make decisions and have budget, are very limited. I think we need to demand of our future leaders of any political colour that they put a responsible use of technology at the absolute heart of how we build Britain in the future. We can stand up and say that we're going to match the AI economies of the world and be the leading AI country on the planet, but I would just say a 5-letter word to you, China. I don't believe we can beat China at their game. I don't believe we can become the biggest AI economy in the world, and I don't think very many people do, and certainly not probably the Prime Minister. I do believe we can become the most digitally savvy nation on the planet. I do believe that with focus and intent, we can help all of our policymakers become responsible and really understand what technology can do for all of us. So that's my first point, and I labour it because I perceive so many things that are not working in our country as coming from that failure to really grasp the potential of technology in a responsible, inclusive and sustainable way by people who are making our public policy decisions. So that's my first responsible point. The second one is absolutely about inclusivity. It's about who you have in the room and who is building this stuff. You know, it's no surprise that you'll hear me talk about the unbelievably depressing numbers of people that look like me in the technology sector versus people that look like our announcer who very generously announced me before. You know, one of the great surprises of my life is that when we were starting lastminute.com, it felt like this was going to be incredible. Crazy voices like mine were going to be raised up and people were going to start businesses that felt different, looked different. Technology was going to enable all these different things, but it hasn't quite done that. And it's not just about gender. It's about background, it's about social demographic background, it's about race, and it's about all of the other axes on which people look and feel different to one another. And unless we have those voices in the room, we are not going to find the biases, and we are not going to be able to build the most robust future. And there are very tangible examples of how this makes a massive difference. Cathy O'Neill is a brilliant mathematician, US mathematician, who wrote a book called Weapons of Maths Destruction, which I recommend to many of you if you haven't read it. And she gives hundreds of examples of how data and algorithms are so biased when you don't see them through the lens of the most diverse set of people. And another brilliant young woman, Caroline Criado Perez, recently wrote a book looking at data across lots of different axes, particularly in relation to some of the most kind of important policy decisions that we make. One of the ones that really sticks with me is about the tsunami that happened in Southeast Asia. And they were looking at the data of this stuff. And, you know, inevitably, it was a certain set of people that were looking at the data and thinking about it from a certain set of angles. And it was only when they included a new set of voices in the room that they saw that the reason that so many women and children had died in the tsunami, because they were looking at how to prevent this happening in the future, was not because women and children were all at home or were doing one particular activity, which was how it had been framed previously. It was because women and girls are not taught to swim at school. Boys are. And it was only when women and girls were brought into the conversation and asked about why this data was reflecting this particular challenge that the decision was able to be made to teach women and girls to swim. So, you know, this is important. Data is important, clearly. You know, this is well documented. I'm not the expert on that. But what I am championing is keeping a diverse set of voices in the room when you're looking at any of this stuff. That, to me, is responsibility. Not just about gender, but also about physical disabilities, mental disabilities, about your race, about your background, and so on. It is absolutely fundamental. And then my third point, I guess, would be about what you're working on. Back to the early days of lastminute.com, you know, the unintended consequence of our stupid one-click fast-buy function. And this is where I'm just salute endlessly Tabitha for many things, but both her and Charlie, to put the Sustainable Development Goals at the heart of CogX is really fundamental and so important. You know, I could stand up here and say, it's brilliant, we're so exciting in the UK, we've got all these brilliantly life-changing new CRM technologies, and we've got this wonderful new delivery set of technologies, and we've got this fabulous new bunch of technologies that are going to revolutionize our ability to analyze customer data, whatever it might be. Irrelevant. The only thing that matters over the next decade, in my opinion, is how we are focusing our resources on solving the climate crisis. And if people like me don't stand up and use our voices to say what we believe and to urge others to use the voice and the resources they have, then I don't think we're going to have even a beginning of a shot at solving it. And I've done somewhat of a pivot on this. I used to think, oh, but it's really important, to help people who are facing the challenges of social care, or to help people who have, massively underserved for whatever reason, or to help build, the best possible, biggest UK startup companies. Irrelevant. I would argue we all have a responsibility, because the tech sector is full of some of the smartest brains on the planet. And if they are not focusing on the biggest challenge that we are facing as human beings, what are we doing? Now, not all of you can go out and change the world. I'm not totally naive. But I do think all of you can talk about what the externality of what you're building is. There's a very brilliant Indian thinker called Pavan Sudhakar. He now runs the is president of the World Wildlife Fund, and I'm lucky enough to have spent a bit of time with him. And he talks about the environmental externalities. And he says you must focus in whatever organization you are, profit or not for profit, on what the environmental impact of what you're building or what you're running or what you're creating is. And I think he's absolutely right. Just as now, it would kind of be unacceptable to be in a tech startup and not think about data licensing and privacy and where those boundaries are. It is unacceptable not to consider the environmental impact of what you're doing. I want to leave you with 3 questions. Please use them. Firstly, who are the people that you're working with, and are they representative of a diverse set of opinion and voices? Can you really say that you are trying to be the most inclusive and the most far-reaching in the people that you have in the room? I haven't always succeeded at it. I hope I'm getting a bit better at it, but it's hard and it takes work. It's not just about recruiting female software developers. It's about having challenging voices that aren't like your own, who are sitting in the room, empowered to help you make decisions about whatever you're building. That's the first. The second thing is, are you really building stuff that matters? Can you honestly say that the product that you're creating, the thing you're trying to raise money for, the thing you're giving money to, is the thing that is going to make the biggest difference to us as human beings over the next decade? And then something I use as a litmus test in my own life is when I think forward 10 years, 2030-ish, will I be able to look back and say, yes, I did everything I could to try and help make sure that we have a planet to live on? Can I write my own obituary and say, yes, I did try and use whatever resources I had to make sure that we have a planet to live on? Now, I'm going to end with a big name drop, but I think you'll forgive me. I'm Chancellor of the Open University, and we have our 50th birthday this year. And David Attenborough was absolutely influential in the creation of the Open University, because he was the one that argued and lobbied to get the programming on BBC Two. Now, if, like me, you're a child of the 70s, it's a mixed blessing, because I remember endless programs hours late into the night with men in dark grey trousers and brown corduroy shirts pontificating about geology. But he helped build our university, and I'm lucky enough to have had some dates with him recently to celebrate the OU's 50th. And as he says, we've never had so much information, ever, in the history of time, or so much capacity to use that information to good. But we have to make sure we are using it to solve this crisis. I did a kind of straw poll thing on Twitter recently to work out how much venture capital money goes into climate innovation. And the number that kind of a few people helped me get to was about 3.5%. 3.5%. Now, even if I'm wrong by 10, that is half where it should be. I leave you with that. There is so much to do. There is so much opportunity here in the UK. The technologies we're all talking about at this festival are the ones that can help us make sure that we can look back 2030, 2040, 2050 and say, we nailed that. We used our amazing capacity for ingenuity and human capacity for creativity to do the one thing that we really needed to do. So please use your voices, use your brains, use your money, use your skills, because if we don't, and the people here don't, then we really haven't got a hope. Thank you.